Hello and welcome to Pierre the Chef. Once again, it's me, Christopher, along with my friend Steve, who is basically running this because he understands how to set up the Google Hangout and get the link to YouTube and everything, and I don't. So basically, he's sort of running the show. And yes,
are we missing somebody?
Kind of, yeah. As always, Pierre, the title. Person we named the show after, title after him. Pierre is not here.
Yeah, that's it's four months in a row.
Yeah, well, you know what? Remember what happened last time when I said that he had this thing where he had a chance to meet Gordon Ramsay?
Yeah,
I'm pretty certain that was a scam that he fell for.
Okay.
I've only gotten one contact from him since that show. It's been a month. I got a letter from about a week ago by paper mail. Here, take a look at this. What do you notice first about this letter?
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where he sent it from, but wherever he sent it from, it's redacted.
Is he being held at a black site?
I have no idea. He wrote it to me.
Is he undergoing rendition?
He wrote it to me in French. I have taken 2 years of high school French, now ended 25 years ago, so I'm not getting a whole lot of what's here. Even if I did understand the French, I don't know that would necessarily make a whole lot of sense with how much of it's missing. But I do know that wherever it was sent from, the postmark, I did not recognize the alphabet. It used regular numbers, so I don't know where the hell he is. But because it used regular numbers, I know the postage on the letter cost 1,430 of whatever currency is represented by a capital M with 3 horizontal lines and an umlaut, followed by a schwa. I have no clue what that is. My Google foo has failed me, but that is apparently the currency wherever he has ended up.
So okay, so
Yeah.
he got a chance to meet Gordon Ramsay, and he somehow found himself abducted and imprisoned in some Eastern European gulag.
It's possible. I'm not quite certain, but that's the sense that I'm getting from this.
But at least they do have mail service there. So
yeah, so it's not a.
The Geneva Convention is being observed in some degree.
Yeah. So they redacted the letter. Whoever he says somewhere between where he is and where I am. Yeah, somebody screened the letter for content. I don't know what's going on. He may be in a great deal of trouble, but I think he's on his own.
Well, if the people holding Pierre captive are watching this, can you please let him go so he can come back by about a month from now and co-host the show with us? We named the show for him. He hasn't made a single show. Okay, I'll give him this month. If he's really in prison somewhere in some armpit of the world, then he gets this. That's a legitimate excuse. That's an excused absence. But I mean,
yeah, we keep the tally just like one of those workplaces with a very strict, attendance policy where you miss X number and you're fired.
Exactly.
Because that way you don't have to use your brain. The last job they literally were one time not able to fire somebody for being incompetent, but they were kicking people out the door for attendance because the attendance policy is black and white and competence is a matter of perspective, I guess.
It's not really subjective if you showed up or not, so we can.
Yeah, exactly.
We can rely on that.
Yeah. So, but you know what? The way that Pierre has to spin this, as far as attendance goes, he has a perfect record.
That's true. Well, don't say that. Now he's not going to want to blemish his record. I mean, if Cal Ripken had missed, 2,000 games in a row,
he has by now, hasn't he?
That's true. By now he has, but he's no longer on the roster. The trick is to stay on the roster and never actually play in any of the games.
That would be quite a trick.
That would be quite a trick.
How do you avoid the accusation waste of a roster spot if you ever play?
Because there's always the chance that you could get put in the bottom of the ninth and you'll just break it wide open. You've just never been picked. That's all.
The first man ever to get a pay cut in arbitration.
But he plays so well during spring training. That's why he always
put him in spring training. Okay.
he always makes the roster. He always makes the roster because he always has an awesome spring, and he makes the team, and then they never put him in. There you go.
Well, that would be a goal in life.
Yeah. So now, let's segue from that to another light, frivolous topic of summer conversation, gun control.
Yes.
And gun violence in general, because as you said when you shared the link for this on Facebook, it is America's favorite recreational activity.
Form of recreational homicide.
Yeah,
yes.
Form of recreational homicide. I mean, if you're going to kill somebody and you're in the United States and you're not using a gun, I mean, you're really missing out. Yeah. It's like going to the it's like going to the water park and not going down the water slide. Like
it's amateur hour.
Yeah.
It's like like you're trying to stab someone like you're in frickin' Canada.
Yeah, exactly. What, did we lose a war or something? This is America. We shoot each other here.
Yes.
And we don't even have reasons. We just do it to do it.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, at least in Mexico, if you get shot, it's because of some kind of a drug cartel thing.
Well,
here in the United States,
or perhaps a vacationing American spring breaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and let's face it.
The ones who are down there during spring break chanting "Build that wall." That's classy. That's classy.
That's kind of a different situation, But yeah, so we have a little gun problem in the United States.
Just a little gun problem. Yeah.
We don't even know how many guns there are in circulation, although estimates are fairly high. We have a pretty good record going.
Number of people by a huge margin at this point.
I think it's in the hundreds of millions, the high end of the estimate, and that's
when you hear the people in Congress bragging that they have more guns than they need but less guns than they want.
Yeah. Well, thanks, public servant.
It's like people are like, I need more guns. It's like, oh, you're not going to be able to fire them all at once.
Yeah, and honestly, who is like, what did you do? Like, who did you piss off that you feel you need this many guns?
Yeah, well, one thing about guns, about protecting yourself from the government, which is always the big thing that they brag about until somebody goes and shoots people at a baseball park, and then they start saying that he's a Bernie Sanders supporter, so it's the Democrats' fault.
Yeah.
They're always saying that the guns are to shoot at the government when they become tyrannical. And then it's if the government is advocating shooting at the government with guns, I think something is wrong in the culture.
Yeah, it's
a bold position, but I'm taking it.
It takes that whole. Well, I mean, it's sort of the most grotesque extreme of the whole Republican Party attitude toward government, which is we hate the government, now elect us to be in it. It's like the government is so awful and so evil that we support having basically unchecked gun ownership in this country, even though 30,000 people get killed by guns every year, because, hey, we might need the guns. The government might try to, I don't know, enforce eminent domain on us or something.
Yeah, it's something that somebody on Facebook had posted something where they said, 30,000, but this many were suicide, this many were justifiable. And so it's only really this much. I said, yes, if you come up with a way to just arbitrarily discount 99.4% of the gun homicide, suddenly the problem doesn't look so bad.
Yeah, well, and that's just moving the goalpost, because when you compare gun statistics in the United States to gun statistics from other comparable countries like Great Britain or Canada, or you're comparing total gun deaths. You're not comparing, unjustifiable homicides.
Yeah. Well,
only.
even if you do it per capita, America is, you scale for population. America is still above and beyond other countries.
Yeah. Well, there's a really great website called gunpolicy.org where you can do comparisons. And what everybody should do, if you have any doubt that the gun problem in the United States is way out of proportion with the rest of the advanced world, you do total gun deaths, and you do rate, as in rate per 100,000. So now you're getting a comparable number. Then people can't say, well, there's just more gun deaths in America because there's more people. No, no, no. You're not comparing. You're comparing rates per 100,000. And you compare that with the United States and Canada and Great Britain and basically all of the European democracies and Australia, and you'll see the big red bar of the United States way up here, and everybody else is right down there. Because it's not even close. It's ridiculously out of proportion.
And then they pull out these charts where they find a way to put the United States in the middle of the countries that are higher, and then the ones they choose are like, you know, the Zambarian Republic, you know, places you've never heard of have a per capita that's higher or something, and it's like, no, you're just making stuff up now. You're cooking the data to try to get what you want.
Yeah, or a country like Mexico, where I think between 1/3 and half of the gun deaths are related in some way to drug-related violence. So it's a very different situation than in the United States, where slightly less than half of the gun deaths in the United States are suicides, and that's, people cite that as somehow as a way to say, well, therefore it's not as big of a problem.
But yeah,
really,
because here's the thing about the suicide aspect of this. Do you remember like watching old cartoons, Looney Tunes, whatever, where people, where they're playing suicide for laughs, somebody's doing really miserable and they stick their head in an oven?
Yeah.
Exactly. I accepted that for what it was, but I never really understood it. The reason why is that old style ovens, the gas would you'd actually end up with gas in the oven itself.
Right.
And so that was suffocate. If you wanted to commit suicide, you could suffocate yourself on the gas. You would just open the door, put the gas on with no light, the gas would pour in, and you would fall asleep, and that would be the end of it. You would suffocate, and it was a easy, painless suicide. And what ended up happening, with this becoming a major problem, they redesigned. The government stepped in and said, okay, you know what? No more of this. You have to redesign. They came up with a way where the ovens did not do that anymore. And people always say, well, if people are going to commit suicide, they're going to find a way, even if you take away the guns. But if you take away the easy ways, it goes down. When the ovens were changed and you couldn't buy them like that anymore, and you couldn't commit suicide in them that way, the suicide rate dropped comparably. It didn't go up elsewhere. It's not like every single person who was going to commit suicide by suffocating themselves in the oven instead found a knife or a gun or jumped off a building. They said, you know what? I'm not willing to work at this, and the suicide rate went down.
Yeah, well, because a lot of suicides are impulsive, and I mean, people who kill themselves often have been struggling with long-term issues, but they just reach kind of a breaking point. And they have a really, really bad couple of hours. And if they have access to means to kill themselves, that's usually when they try to do it. And if you give them easy access to a method that works most of the time, like firearms, I mean,
And once you're holding the gun, you only need a half seconds of deciding to do it. If it's something else, if it's pills, you have to take the swab. You have time to recover, time to call poison control, whatever. You have a gun pointed at yourself. The moment you make that decision, there's no going back, because the gun goes off and it's over. You don't have any time for second thoughts at that point.
Yeah. And why not make it as difficult as possible? I mean, that's what, and because they use that same bullshit argument. They, if somebody wants to kill themselves bad enough, they'll find a way. Okay, if somebody wants to,
yes, they will. But why make it easy for the people who don't want to kill themselves that badly?
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but they use the same argument when there's a mass shooting, and they say, well, if he really wanted to kill somebody, he would have killed him even if he couldn't get a gun. Okay, but don't you want to make it as hard as possible for the aspiring mass killer? I mean, if you looked into a crystal ball and you saw that at the mall where you were going to go shopping tomorrow, somebody was going to come in with a gun and kill as many people as possible, or somebody was going to come in with a knife and kill as many people as possible, which would you rather happened? I mean, of course, it's awful if somebody comes in with any kind of violent intent and tries to hurt people. But it's a completely different situation if you give somebody a weapon that they can use to kill 10 people in 10 seconds from standing in one spot, versus something that you actually have to get into close proximity with somebody to use, that won't be necessarily lethal with a single strike. I mean, the rationality of that just escapes me. Of course if I want to kill somebody bad, and if I can hit somebody with a baseball bat if I want to, but if all I want to do is kill as many people as possible and you give me a gun, that's what I'm going to use.
You can use the gun, the knife, the baseball bat, or the club. It's like, well, here's a tough one. Let me use the ranged weapon.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like, and whenever there's like the aftermath of some awful mass shooting, which is every couple there's United States, there's another
one. Well, that's not a mass shooting. X number of people didn't die. Move the goalpost of what qualifies as a mass shooting. I've seen that one. I'm like, where like 3 people have been killed and 7 were wounded or something like that. Like, well, that doesn't qualify as a mass shooting. It's still a shooting.
Yeah, it kind of does, though. Yeah, I mean, there are differing definitions, but the most commonly accepted definition that I see used in the media now is, I think it's 3 or more people being shot, not necessarily killed,
but mass shooting. Yeah, not mass shooting homicide.
Right. Although they often go together. Yeah. But yeah, there'll be something like that'll happen, and then someone with a modicum of like decency will speak out, or will tweet something, or make a video or whatever, or go on TV and will say, enough is enough. This is horrible. Or this shooter just murdered somebody's child in cold blood, and the lives of our children are worth more than your guns, which I don't know, makes sense to me. And some yeah, exactly. Some asshole like Joe the plumber, or about a million other people, will come back, will actually have the fucking balls to respond to that and say, no, it's not. Like, are you seriously telling me I should be more invested in your right to own a gun than in a child's right, or anybody else's right to live?
Yeah, see, these people who are, I've put some thought in this. This is sort of like the relevant thought I have, or the closest thing to insight I have, so I'm going to try to get out of the way early. The people like almost like fetishize guns, or sometimes you see it referred to online as ammosexuals. I'm trying to figure out what motivates this. Because it can't just be some blind obsession with guns. I mean, there's so many people. There has to be some sort of internal logic to it, right?
One would hope so.
That's fair enough. The closest thing I can come up with, incrementalism. I'll probably have to explain that a little bit more. Compare it to abortion. See, in the United States, and painting with a broad brush, but here, generally, gun rights and anti-abortion rights go hand in hand on the conservative side. Those are very strong conservative positions. I mean, not 100%, but generally. And the overall abortion, it's simply getting it banned, was lost with Roe versus Wade. So instead, they can't simply make it illegal, so they're chipping away. They're going a little bit at a time. Life begins at birth, life begins in the 3rd trimester, life begins in the 2nd trimester, life begins with brain activity, life begins with the heartbeat, right. Life begins at conception, life begins with dinner and a movie, life begins with eye contact across a crowded room. Because they keep moving it back and chipping away. And the goal is to make it completely illegal, and they're doing it incrementally, a little bit at a time. And I think that on the gun side of things, because that's the approach that they're taking, they think that any sort of gun control is the same thing. They don't see any line between gun control and gun abolition when there's any effort to restrict, military grade, guns or anything of that nature, try to scale it back, have some sort of responsibility for gun ownership. They are doing the same, looking at the same way they look at abortion, just going right to the end game and believing that guns are going to be banned completely.
Yeah.
I don't know that is logical, because it's not, but it does make a certain internal consistent sense.
That does make sense. I never really thought about it that way, but if they view their abortion strategy as incremental, then they assume that the gun control strategy is the same way.
And they keep the same end game.
And And you know, that end game is explicitly told to them by the gun lobby. I mean, that's what the NRA says. Anytime, even if it's in the immediate aftermath of a mass shooting, and some state legislator somewhere kind of meekly raises his hand and says, maybe we should regulate high capacity magazines, and they're like, he's trying to take all your guns away. Are you going to let him take your guns?
Yeah, well, the NRA also tends to get very quiet in the days immediately after a mass shooting before they pop back up. Like they go into hiding for a day or two on the really major ones and then slowly crawl back out.
Yeah, like very, cockroaches in winter. They're still there.
They're very quiet on some things, like this whole, what is it, Philando Castile, is the name?
Yeah.
Where they haven't said one word about a legal person who had a legal permit to own a gun getting shot and killed by police for having that gun, but he was black and they didn't say a thing. And they have a history of defending white gun owners but not black gun owners, which it's not by design, it's not the intent, but doesn't that in many ways make the NRA functionally a white supremacist organization?
Well, of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. It's one step away from being an explicitly white supremacist organization. It certainly is in practice. I mean, yeah, just about the Philando Castile shooting. And I've been thinking about this for the last couple of days because there's a segment in my video that goes up tomorrow about this because the cop that murdered him was acquitted.
Oh, of course.
And he wasn't even charged with murder. He was charged with manslaughter, and they couldn't even convict him on that.
Well, just killing a police officer, killing a black person isn't really a crime in America in a practical sense. It's illegal on the books, but in actual practice.
Exactly. Like raping a woman. For all intents and purposes, it's legal. Because you're probably going to get away with it if you do it. And if you're a cop and you murder a black person, you're probably going to get away with it. This is practically speaking. There's really no consequence to that. And just
because you're caught on film shooting a person with no provocation doesn't mean you're going to get into any trouble.
Exactly. Well, just imagine. Just do a little bigotry algebra here and switch the black variable for the white variable, and just imagine if the Philando Castile, because the police officer who killed him was not a white guy. The police officer who killed him was also a person of color. So imagine if Philando Castile had been white, but everything else about the case was the same, and a police officer who just so happened to be a person of color had shot and killed a white man who was carrying a legally permitted firearm and had calmly informed the police officer that he had the gun in an attempt to be upfront and honest and hopefully avoid any dangerous situation.
Wayne LaPierre would be outside the courthouse holding the noose.
Oh my God. It would be, yeah, exactly. I mean, a legally permitted gun owner said to a police officer, just to let you know, just to inform you, I do have a gun in the car. That's all he said. And the cop immediately freaked out, told him, don't reach for it. Don't reach for it. He's like, I'm not reaching for it. I'm not reaching for it. Shoots him 7 times. Imagine if that happened to a white guy, a white licensed gun owner. And especially if it had been a non-white cop that did it, there would have been a lynching. But with Philando Castile being a black man, hey, the cop felt threatened. What are you going to do? The cop felt like his life was being threatened. He acted in the only way he could have.
Why is it that police are allowed to panic and it's okay, but citizens with guns pointed at them are not?
Yeah, exactly.
This is a trained police officer who can use "I panicked" as an excuse, but if you're a common, regular citizen and somebody's pointing a gun at you, you're expected to keep your cool, or else you're going to be held responsible for it.
Yeah.
Was that the one thing in the Daily Show where the woman who was driving the car referred to the police officer as "sir," and after the shooting, and Trevor Noah was like, "See, even when the police officer panics, the black person still remembers their training."
Yeah, exactly, because she doesn't want to get shot either.
Yeah.
She just saw her boyfriend get straight up murdered for doing absolutely nothing wrong. She knows it. And
if she had gotten upset, that's more of a threat than he was. She'd get shot too.
Yeah, I mean,
and this is why when people just dismiss the idea of white privilege, it drives me nuts, because these are but that's part of the thing about privilege. In many ways, it's invisible if you have it. I read, reading something where a person was talking about making a trip from like Ohio to Chicago, taking the interstate, and actually said, I hope I make it.
Yeah.
That would never even occur to me.
No. Well, and I mean,
but that's day-to-day life.
And even if it doesn't escalate to like a lethal level, I mean, I have several black friends who all have similar experiences of just being pulled over and hassled for nothing. You know, for stuff that if I like, I mean, I've been pulled over for speeding a few times in my life. I've been pulled over once for having a tail light out. And the cop basically just came up and said, hey, your tail light's out. And he wrote me a repair order. And that was it. It was over in like 5 minutes. It was the quickest traffic stop I've ever been involved in.
Some black drivers have been murdered for that.
Some black drivers have been murdered for that.
And we're going to call it murder because that's what it is.
That's what it is. Well, what? Yeah, I mean,
it's not a self-defense. It's flat out homicide. It's cold-blooded murder.
And unlike the Philando Castile case, where you can say, well, he was armed. Most of the time, folks aren't even armed. Sometimes they're even running away from the cop
on video,
and they're unarmed, and the cop still
shoots them in the back and sets a gun down next to him, and then
and nothing happens. I mean, this is and if those are the people who are trained in firearm usage, who are legally empowered to use firearms in situations doing that. Imagine how much worse life is when you have a country of 300 plus million people and probably even more guns than that just out there, and I mean, it's just the fact that anybody is okay with this, and the fact that there are other countries we can look to for examples of how they have handled the problem, and we simply refuse to do anything about it, is absurd. Is just absurd. And people who say, well, if you take away our guns, then it's either, well, if you take away guns from law-abiding citizens, then only criminals will have guns. That's argument one. And argument.
But you know what? That is such a bullshit argument, because the whole concept of people are going to break the law anyway. Well, murder is illegal, but it still happens. So what's the point of having laws against murder?
Why have laws against anything?
Yeah, it's the most impotent cry of just pathetic helplessness you could possibly imagine, that says that if something is not going to be 100% effective, then don't even try.
Yeah, and it's an argument that people make very selectively. They object. They only object to certain laws.
Only guns are the place where that's an issue. It's like, well, gun shootings are still going to happen, so let's not try. It's like, well, if you ban abortions are still going to happen. No, never. We must ban it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think another part of it is that, and a lot of this is due to the sort of Republicanization of our political discourse, and the fact that the right wing has been able to so dominate things since the 1980s, and they're totally driven by the NRA and the gun lobby in general. But it goes back further than that too. I mean, for the entirety of American history, there's been this romanticizing of guns, and this tying of the idea of liberty and individuality and self-determination to owning a gun, so that you have so much invested in this thing. It's like a totem. It's not even just a tool or a weapon. It's this symbol of your freedom and democracy and liberty, and and then you say, well, but I don't think you should have that. And people they rebel, they throw a fit.
Well, I still think, as far as gun ownership goes, gun control, not gun abolition, but gun control, I really think that you should look at it like car ownership. I really think that's the template they should use. It's registered. You have to prove you're competent first. You have to be you have to register it. You have to have insurance, so if something goes wrong, you have some sort of financial protection. If it's stolen, you have to report it.
Yes.
So that you're not responsible for what happens from that point. It really should be. I really think that would be the good template just to start with, to regulate guns like cars.
Yeah, and I mean,
But the NRA has their own database of gun owners, even though they have helped push through a law that says the government is not allowed to have a database of gun owners. They can do it though.
well, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay if they do it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they're not going to try to take anybody's guns away. They probably want the database so they can mail them free guns. Have some more guns. I mean,
yeah. I mean, if you have a gun in your house, you're far more likely to shoot a family member than an intruder. And you hear about stories really frequently where people they think there's an intruder and they shoot at them and they hit them and wound them and sometimes kill them, and it turns out to be their own kids sneaking back into the house at 2 a.m. after being out when they weren't supposed to be.
And
it's so bound and determined to it's like they say if all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
what's the point of a gun if you're not shooting someone?
It's exactly. Why? Well, I'm not just going to keep it in the safe. Okay. Well, maybe you just shouldn't have it at all. Oh no, I got to have it. Well, and I mean, it's like the people always make it about them, and they say, well, what about if you put too strict gun regulations into practice, then that just punishes the law-abiding gun owners, and that to me completely misses the point of the problem. The problem is not the entirety of the problem, but a huge part of the problem is that there are just too many guns in circulation. It doesn't matter if most or even nearly all of the people who own guns are absolutely vigilant, responsible gun owners. That's not the point. When you have hundreds of millions of people owning guns in the same country, terrible things are guaranteed to happen. It's just a fact. It's a function of large numbers. It doesn't matter if you are the most responsible gun owner in the world. If you live in a country where there are that many guns in circulation and it is that easy to get one, then you end up with a country of 300 million people where there are between 30 and 40,000 people killed by guns every year. Every single year. I mean, just think about that. People say, well, 30,000 is not that much, and you have a country of 300 million people. Yeah, every single year. I mean, it happens again it's not like, well, 30,000 people, that's a lot. Yeah, but it's not like a 10-year total. It happens every year. It's horrifying. And it's been that way for 10 or 15 years. It's been at that 30,000 a year level for a very long time.
And the effort is not the goal. I mean, the goal is to prevent it entirely, but realistically, that's the ideal. But realistically, the goal is just to reduce it to something a bit more reasonable. No one denies that as long as there's guns, there's going to be gun shootings. But you try to get down to you try to reduce it as much as possible. And going back to the driving comparison, a good example of that is the laws against drunk driving, which at one point were not very strict, but they started to realize there's a problem here. They started passing law. They started doing awareness. They passed laws. They started cracking down, much more serious penalties for it. And in the last 40 or 50 years, drunk driving in the United States has dropped by about half, even though there's a lot more people driving now. That's effective, and that's good, but it's not 100% effective, which is the argument that we try to make with guns. This is a good thing, and it saves a lot of lives. It doesn't save all because people still do it, but it's the problem is not nearly what it used to be.
And perhaps most importantly of all, it sets a standard in the culture that frames it as a problem. And I think one of the big problems with the way pro-gun people approach the issue is that many of them don't even acknowledge that it's a problem. Right. They just say, well, it's just, these things just happen. You can't even convince them that it's a problem. And I feel like that's one of the secondary functions of passing laws and regulations like that. Obviously, the desired primary result is to either directly prevent the thing that the law outlaws, or to create some legal recourse when it happens. But there's a secondary effect of saying as a society, okay, now we're saying this is unacceptable. You know, we're saying we're drawing a line, and we're saying you can't step over this line. We're saying
drunk driving is seen as unacceptable now in a way
Yeah.
that it wasn't necessarily seen as such a bad thing in the past. People weren't aware of it or didn't see it as a problem, and now it is. I mean, just the concept is you have a visceral reaction to it.
Yeah, exactly. When my father was young, he's told me before, you know, and I'm almost old enough to remember this because it didn't change all that long ago about drunk driving, where if you were driving drunk and you got pulled over by a local cop, especially if it was someone who knew you or knew your family or whatever, 9 times out of 10 he would just say, all right, just go home, be careful, and that was it.
Mm.
And now it's not like that at all. Now it's taken very seriously, and you know, to the point where if a cop does pull somebody over and he has reason to believe that they're driving drunk and he lets them go, the cop can probably get in more trouble for that than he could for actually shooting somebody. At least if he shot a black person.
Right.
You know, it's taken very seriously, and as you say, I mean, the statistics bear it out. The percentage of drunk driving deaths has gone significantly down.
I mean, there was a time with drunk driving where you could get off simply on the grounds that you were in an altered state and therefore were not able to make the rational, cognizant decisions, and therefore could not be held responsible for it.
Yeah.
Which, you know, now we have the temporary insanity defense, which is essentially the same thing without a cause. But you know, that used to be a valid defense, and it worked.
Yeah, and I guess if you happen to run somebody over with your car, I guess that person just killed themselves.
Yeah,
like people, like folks say, you know, about all of the people who have been murdered by cops, and the cop gets off scot-free. Oh, I guess those people just killed themselves. Like, nobody murdered them. You know, the court found that nobody was responsible for their death, so they just killed themselves.
Of course, drunk driving has been a fairly serious thing in the family. My grandfather was killed by a drunk driver back in '68. So, yeah. So it's something taken a bit more seriously, you know.
Yeah, well, as it should. I mean, and so should gun violence or gun death in general. I mean, I try to use the term gun death because that covers everything.
Yeah.
I mean, gun violence
isn't necessarily a homicide. You shoot somebody where they live, that's gun violence, but it's
yeah, and you know, that gun death covers everything, because I think gun suicides are a terrible thing and should be prevented. I think accidental gun deaths are bad and should be prevented. I want to shrink the whole number.
Yeah.
You know,
but you don't need to itemize it to work at reducing it.
No,
but you know, itemizing it isn't done to work at reducing it. It's meant to reduce the impact of it, to dismiss a bunch of them as not counting for whatever reason.
Exactly. Well, we can cut this in half because half of those are suicides and nobody gives a fuck about those people. And the heartbreaking thing about it, and the frustrating and just the enraging thing about it, is that the world is full of examples of countries that know how to handle the problem. And we still here in the United States just pretend like, oh, it's just a fact of life. Can't do anything about it. What are you going to do? You know, meanwhile, in Australia, the problem is
it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. The UK, Canada, these are countries. And I mean, Canada even actually has a fairly high rate of gun ownership. You know, I mean, in other, like, and so does Switzerland. You know, there are countries where there's a high rate of gun ownership that doesn't have nearly the gun death.
You know what I think the difference is, though? We in America, we have this whole culture that talks about personal responsibility, which in many cases involves avoiding personal responsibility. But personal responsibility is the term they come back to. I have a personal responsibility. I take, you know, my actions are what I do. You do. Other countries look at responsibility more as a social thing than a personal thing. That you have a responsibility to the community that you live in as well as yourself, and that you have a responsibility to others. And so, you know, the gun ownership is one of these things where this person in America, the whole personal responsibility, it's the personal responsibility is like, I can do whatever I want. And the social responsibility is like, but I have to be careful that other people don't get hurt by my decisions. A lot of Americans don't care who's hurt by their decisions as long as they get what they want.
Yeah, because we're raised, or at least there's a significant portion of our culture that is sending the message that basically you live in a vacuum. You know, and if you do something,
I do this myself. No, you.
if you accomplish something, then it's because you worked hard and you did a good job, and you don't owe a thanks to anybody. And you know, that's just that's objectively false. Like I don't even see I don't see why we even entertain people who say that. We're social animals. It's in our DNA. We evolved as social creatures. We live in society. The very concept of individuality is meaningless outside of a social context. I mean, the idea of private property, which we fetishize almost as much as guns in this country, is meaningless outside of a social context. The reason why private property exists is because we respect each other's rights to own stuff. Your right to own private property comes from other people. Your right to own a gun comes from other people. Other people affirm that you have that right.
The right to own a gun was written in the Second Amendment by God Himself.
Yes. It was the third tablet that was handed down to Moses. It just wasn't discovered until 1787. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a difficult mountain to climb, because in the United States, unlike with car ownership, gun ownership is viewed as an entitlement. Mm-hmm. You know, people, and that's what people say. They'll say, well, there's no constitutional right to a car. Well, maybe there shouldn't be a constitutional right to have a gun for no reason either. I mean,
there's a constitutional right to count slaves as 3/5 of a person. The Constitution is not perfect.
We fixed that. And I don't even advocate that the Second. Yeah, exactly. On paper, we got rid of that. I don't even advocate for a complete repeal of the Second Amendment. I would just like to expand it a little bit to make it clear that.
But it is clear. It is clear. I don't understand the people who say you cannot pass any laws restricting gun ownership in any way because of a part of the Constitution that uses the phrase well-regulated militia. What part of well-regulated means you cannot pass regulation?
You know what I love is when I love when people try to pretend that they're English majors, and they say, well, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, well, that's a separate clause. It doesn't modify what comes after. So, okay, so they just put it there for the hell of it? The framers of the Constitution just put it there for shits and giggles?
Yeah, the Constitution is full of purple prose.
Yeah, and very, very haphazardly composed sentences. I'm sure, they were drafting that amendment of the Bill of Rights, and they were just like, wait a minute, the well-regulated thing doesn't have anything to do with the gun right thing. Why? Yeah, just leave it. Fuck it. I mean, why is it there if it's not meant to inform how that right is meant to be interpreted? So I agree with you. But
the Constitution is not full of a lot of wasted words.
No, it's really not. I mean, the whole section about the president is what, like 2 paragraphs? I mean, it's like the most important job created in the document. And it's like, okay, here's who this guy is. He has to be this old. He serves for this long. There you go.
Theoretically, the office of president was only created to convince people they had a king. Theoretically, I've heard that. I don't know how true it is, but
yeah. And the Electoral College was a compromise to slave states.
Right.
So, just in case you want another reason to hate the Electoral College, it was created. It was created as a to throw a bone to slave states.
The only thing that I see as a positive about the Electoral College is that it contains the damage. Some states are just cut and dried, and it's done. I mean, remember 2000, Bush versus Gore, all that stuff in Florida. Imagine if it was a nationwide thing where it was this vote, and that happened everywhere. Because in the middle of Oklahoma, the reddest of blood red states, where if somebody's going to tinker with the results and put a couple hundred extra votes in for the Republican candidate, who's going to notice? Well, there's really no point in doing that on the Electoral College, because that Oklahoma is going to vote for the Republican candidate even if he has killed people on Times Square. Yeah,
exactly.
So that's the only big positive I see about the Electoral College is containing the damage to different locations and separating it so that it's not a nationwide fiasco.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not. I can see both sides of it. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a huge fan of the Electoral College, but at the same time,
I'm not either. But
I'm not someone who says like it must be abolished. Like it's whatever.
Yeah,
you got to elect a president somehow. It's always. I mean, there's parts about having just a straight first past the post popular vote election that trouble me too. So, you know.
But still, they have other countries have like you can rate the candidates. So you say who you'd want first, second, third, and so on, and then they take all the first. And if nobody gets 50% of it, they drop whoever got the least votes for first place, and then they eliminate everyone who didn't get any votes for first. Instead, everyone's going to get some.
Right.
They get rid of it, and then they retabulate without that person in there, and they keep doing that until somebody gets 50%. Which that way, in the last election, if you were, if you didn't like Trump, you could put him fourth behind, Stein and Johnson, who are both kind of crazy people too, instead. But you do what you, and that way you wouldn't have the concept of wasting your vote and having the bad candidate get in, because you could put the bad candidate at the bottom.
Yeah, and I'm a big advocate for that. I made videos about that a couple years ago. And,
but I bet you that there's a huge portion of Americans who don't understand that and would refuse to try.
Oh yeah, like no, literally, all you have to do is write numbers next to their names. I don't want to do that.
Ranking? What?
That's yeah, because Americans hate ranking shit.
Yeah.
Right. That's our least favorite thing in the world.
Cowboys, #1.
Yeah, really. Yeah. We like to do pretend rankings where we're at the top, even though there is no list other than like military spending where we're actually at the top. Yeah. So and rate of gun death.
Yes. Let's bring that full circle.
In the developed world.
Pierre's probably still alive because he's somewhere where there aren't guns, I would imagine.
Yeah, or he's someplace where only the warlords have them. So there's a monopoly on the violence.
As long as you know the French word for warlord, because the letter he sent me is in French, so I'm not real.
Well, they probably would have redacted the warlord stuff,
Probably. First time I've ever got a redacted letter.
The French stuff is. The French stuff is probably, it's been selectively edited, so it sounds like he's saying, "I'm having a great time. I am being well treated."
Yeah. You ever hear that thing on the radio, that public service announcement by Dwayne Stump about drunk driving?
No.
You ever hear that? No. It's like they're trying to get, it's like you see some burned out on drugs person trying to do an anti-drug PSA, and he keeps screwing it up. Yeah. Don't drink, but if you do drink, don't drive. It's like, no, it's don't drink. Weekends are for drunks. Do drugs. And then like, Dwayne, okay, Dwayne, I think we got it. And they piece it together from all the different things, and it doesn't set. It's so choppy. It's like the last episode Chef did on South Park. Yeah, and they piece it together to get the script they want.
It's like the scene that Richard Crenna did in the second Hot Shots movie, where he was taken a prisoner of war, and he did like the hostage video, and he was like, "I'm being very well treated. The food is tasty and nourishing."
Yeah, seen like people are actual prisoner of war who are forced to send out messages, like they'll have a photograph and they'll but they all have their middle fingers extended, to try to send the message. This is not what you think it is.
My eye itches. I just have a Well, shall we do 5 minutes of talking about the president?
If we must.
If we must. It's
okay.
It's in
the contract.
It's in the show charter. Yes, exactly.
Do we have the timer yet?
It's in the bylaws. I do not have an on-screen timer, unfortunately.
This is something we never should have made Pierre responsible for.
Pierre is. Well, what happened was Google discontinued app development for Hangouts. I'm sure there might have been somebody who came up with a really brilliant on-screen timer for Google Hangout, but you can't get it anymore because Google said, "No, that was too much fun. Can't do that anymore."
You can shoot at your Google Hangout instead.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, this is America. Shoot somebody, or harass women and make lots of money, and we'll just let you do it.
Or cozy up with Nazis.
Cozy, yeah. Hey, if you want to, if you really want to get Google support, then you have to invite some more Nazis onto your channel.
Yeah, I'd never heard of Lacey Green until all this nonsense started, and I really don't want to learn anything about her because of all this nonsense.
Now there's no reason to.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I might have said, "Oh yeah, check her out. She does some interesting stuff." Now it's like, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Yeah, look up the word.
Going great.
Look up Quisling. That'll explain it. Okay, so let's do 5 minutes of talking about Trump. I actually have something for this, so I will start.
Right, because I rambled a bit more last time, but I got very little this time. So please take it away.
Your anti-Trump hatred. It's so obvious how biased you are. Okay, here we go. Okay, so as folks probably know, the Muslim holy month of Ramadan just ended, and last month, actually, before either right before or right after we did our show last month, at the beginning of Ramadan, President Trump issued a Ramadan, like a happy Ramadan statement, and it's been being shared again in the last couple of days because Ramadan's over now, and for the first time since 1996, the White House will not be hosting a post-Ramadan dinner at the White House. Mm-hmm. No reason given, just, you know, although I think we know what the reason is. But Trump released this Ramadan statement last month, like, and instead of just saying, "Hey everybody, have a nice Ramadan," he released a statement that mentioned terrorism and conflict and violence and the importance of defeating the perverted ideology of the terrorists.
Enjoy your Christmas, you capitalist fucks.
Yeah, and he mentioned, he bragged about his recent visit to Saudi Arabia, where he met with the leaders of more than 50 Muslim nations, and he sold weapons to one of them that sponsors terrorism, but we're not supposed to talk about that. And basically it was happy Ramadan.
Terrorism is bad when we can't profit from the oil there.
Yeah, exactly. And it was basically happy Ramadan, Muslims. I don't have anything against you, but stop being terrorists. And someone on Twitter actually a couple days ago, this is what got me interested in this, retweeted that from Trump where he mentions terrorism and violence like 3 or 4 times. And then they retweeted George W. Bush's happy Ramadan proclamation from 2001. And in 2001, Ramadan fell in November because the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar, so it doesn't always line up with the solar calendar.
So this is 2 months after September 11th.
This is 2 months after September 11th. And George W. Bush's message on the observance of Ramadan was, I extend warm greetings to Muslims throughout the United States and around the world. The Islam that we know is a faith devoted to the worship of one God. It teaches the value and importance of charity, mercy, and peace. And it is one of the fastest growing religions in America, with millions of American believers today. And then he talks about the American Muslim community being very diverse, and talks about people praying together in mosques all across our great land, and how Muslims are part of every walk of American life, and we send our sincerest wishes to Muslims in America and around the world for health, prosperity, and happiness during the month of Ramadan. 2 months after the most violent and deadly and notorious act of terrorism ever that was committed by Islamist terrorists, George W. Bush sends a happy Ramadan message that does not mention terrorism or violence, that seems to be a very nice message of good wishes and happy holidays to people celebrating the holiday. Donald Trump can't get through it without mentioning terrorism and violence.
I still think that George Bush was a terrible, terrible president and a terrible, terrible administration, but the Trump administration is a level all its own. There's no comparison to anything that's ever happened in the history of this country.
Yeah, and I mean, you always have to sort of bring out the disclaimer and say, I'm not saying that George W. Bush was a good president. Because he wasn't. He was a terrible president. But it's shocking when you compare the attitude of George W. Bush toward Muslims, when his entire presidency was dominated by a conflict with Islamist terrorists. And George W. Bush went out of his way, at least in public. I mean, you could say he wasn't a Muslim-friendly president because he started 2 wars in predominantly Muslim countries. But in terms of when the face he put forward and the words he gave to the American people, he went out of his way not to denigrate and marginalize and vilify Muslims. And Trump never misses a chance, even while he's talking out of the other side of his mouth and talking about, oh, I love Muslims, right? So...
How are we doing on time?
15 seconds.
I just remember Trump has done a lot of complaining about Obama going to the golf course, but he spent more visits to golf course than he's had weeks in his administration so far.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Obama did 10% of the stuff Trump had done, and time.
Yeah, and time, exactly. Well, just one more thing. Just do some more bigotry algebra. Imagine if President Obama had released a Happy Easter message to Christians where he mentioned like abortion clinic bombings and mass shootings.
Yeah.
It wouldn't. No. Again, there would have been an assassination attempt, or there would have been impeachment hearings brought up the next day. Right? It's fucking ridiculous. Okay, so that was our 5 minutes of Trump plus a little bit extra because I couldn't resist.
Couldn't help yourself.
Yeah, I just couldn't. So what else has been going on?
Movie I saw yesterday. Finally saw Wonder Woman.
Oh, did you?
Have you seen that?
I am holding to my boycott. I am not seeing it. I will see it when it comes out on video, but I'm not seeing it.
It is worth seeing. It is definitely worth seeing.
That's what I hear. That's what everybody says. I'm happy to hear that.
And it's DC finally got one right. And it's interesting watching a movie where the main character is a woman, so the entire thing she's being told all the things she can't do. You can't do this. You can't dress like this. You can't go here. You can't behave like that. And eventually she just says hell of it and does all of them anyway. It's great.
I guess
it's a really good movie. The supporting characters actually have character. It's not like broken down to a lot of movies like, well, here's a munitions expert, here's the comic relief, here's the person who's going to do. The characters actually have character. It's a nice variation from what we had before. I think Zack Snyder helped with the story, but not the script. And I think that he was, producer, whatever that actually means anymore. But this was one he really was not very involved with, and it was a much better movie.
Yeah, it's sort of like you can tell which one of the original Star Wars movies George Lucas had the least to do with.
Yeah,
because it's also the best one.
Because I'll say this about Zack Snyder. I'm actually going to say something good about him. I think from a technical standpoint, he's actually a very, very good director. I mean, I'm not a student of film the way you are, the way a lot of people are, but when he does a film, you know what's going on. You know, if there's an action scene, it's not a bunch of blurry 1 second rapid fire close-ups changing where you can't really tell what's going on. It's just two people in a closet swinging their arms at each other. He understands the technical parts of directing. You know what's going on. He can tell the story. You can follow where people are and what's going on. His fatal flaw is that he doesn't understand the role of character in telling a story. So he can do a proficient movie, but it's not about anything. Yeah,
he's and he's the best example of all the major directors currently working at like a Hollywood mainstream level of a director who just should not have final cut on his own movie. I mean, you're right. He's very technically proficient. He has a really good eye too. I mean, he can compose a really nice shot when he wants to.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. Was it in Man of Steel where just like they're showing at the farm when he's growing up, and there's a couple scenes of a storm moving in, like water coming out of a gutter in a little plastic bucket, creating a wonderful atmosphere.
Yeah,
and then just screwing it all up.
Yeah, and he doesn't, he doesn't rely on tropes or easy compositions, visual tropes. I mean, he relies on story tropes constantly, but visual tropes as much as like someone like Michael Bay, who he draws a lot of comparison to, and
he's made a career out of doing shitty Transformers movies.
Yeah, well, and Michael Bay and Zack Snyder are very similar in a lot of ways, but Michael Bay tends to settle into a groove, and like all of his movies, if there's not cacophony and explosions and chaos, then it looks like an insurance commercial. You know what I mean? We're like, it's like everything shot at like the golden hour right after sunset, and people, there's like panoramic views of exteriors, and it just all looks the same. And it feels like he just goes on autopilot. Whereas Zack Snyder, even though he makes awful movies, visually, he does come up with some pretty good stuff from time to time. But he needs someone above him. He needs a producer who is empowered contractually to have final cut on the movie to say, okay, Zach, we're not doing a 2.5 hour movie.
Or in Peter Jackson's case, a 4.5 hour movie.
We're doing 2 hours. Okay. 2 hours, right? Carol Reed needed a little bit over 1.5 hours to do The Third Man. If he can make The Third Man in 1 hour and 40 minutes, then you can make a fucking superhero smashy movie in less than 2 hours. It's just, okay, bottom line. And I honestly, even though I love those movies, I would say I would make I would have made a similar request of Christopher Nolan in the Dark Knight trilogy. You know, like, is there any reason why we can't keep this to 2 hours? Because even though I think those films,
didn't Joss Whedon for like the second Avengers movie have like 3.5 hours of footage, and he got it down to 1 minute shorter than the first Avengers movie?
yeah, and you know, even an Avengers movie, which has like 1 million characters in it.
And we haven't even seen Infinity War, which is going to have characters from like every show that has ever existed.
Yeah, I mean,
and DC characters are going to show up. You're going to have some of the old Gold Key characters are going to pop up.
Yeah. Star Trek is going to be in there somehow. I mean,
well, yeah, Chris Pine.
Yeah, hey, that's true. That's true.
Well, actually, DC has Chris Pine, but since everything's going to be in this movie anyway,
they're going to do. Yeah, they'll do the amalgam movie and just smash it all together. But yeah, I mean,
Chris Pine on Saturday Night Live doing that opening thing about telling him apart from the other Chris's.
With the other Chris, yeah, I'm Chris Pine.
This is Chris Pine, not in Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
And Fred,
and Evans.
I was like, that's my Captain Kirk. That's my fucking Captain Kirk. Yeah, I mean, it's just Snyder needs somebody to rein him in. You know, he needs somebody to have script approval over him. He needs somebody to have final cut approval over him. He needs somebody to stand over his shoulder as he's standing over the editor's shoulder in the editing room.
I think Zack Snyder could be a very good piece, an important piece of a very good production, but he can't be the top of the mountain.
No, because we've seen what happens. I mean, yeah, and I mentioned where
they vaporize the city as a crater where Metropolis used to be, and instead of trying to dig survivors out of the rubble, Superman decides to make out with his new girlfriend above the ashes of the dead.
Right. And then which you know, when something similar but at a far smaller scale happened in the Superman episode of Supergirl this year, Superman was actually really upset and really bummed about it and felt responsible for it and kind of beat himself up because he wasn't there to save people. It's like, gee, what's he so upset about? Why isn't he just why isn't he flying straight back to his apartment to have sex with Lois? This is a great moment.
I'd like to see Cavill actually play Superman. Because basically he's just all broody and standing around and letting things happen. Like he's at a hearing of Congress and it explodes and he just stands there looking sad as the flames burn around him. It's like, come on. You know,
it's almost as bad.
It's a nice visual shot, but it makes no sense if you have any understanding of the character. You're interested in the character.
Yeah, well, and in fact, it's destructive to the character. Because why should we think of him as heroic if he's just standing around moping when people are screaming and burning to death? I mean,
didn't you point out the scene where Batman is having a gunfight throughout Gotham and comes around a corner and Superman's just standing there waiting for him? Like, I'll just wait for the fight to come to me.
Yeah, that's what a superhero does. Well, I mean, it's almost.
But Wonder Woman does not have those problems. Wonder Woman she's actually motivated by giving a shit about other people and trying to help them.
Wow, I imagine that.
And what she does makes sense. It's a much better movie. It is really good. I think you're going to really enjoy it.
The tragedy of it is that, and I mentioned this in my Patreon hangout earlier today too. The tragedy of it is that it's too late to reshoot Justice League. Like, you know, everybody's Wonder Woman comes out and it's like a change of pace for the DC franchise and everybody loves it. And it's almost certainly going to outgross the other movies so far. I mean, it's on pace to kill everything else. It's already outgrossed Man of Steel. It's almost certainly going to outgross Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad by the end.
This is what doing a good movie that gets good word of mouth can do for your profit line.
Yeah, I know. Hey, Warner Brothers, doesn't this feel good? Don't you like this? But what's going to happen is in November, we're going to get another Zack Snyder movie.
Right. I mean, people are thinking like, well, Joss Whedon's going to save it, but he's just doing a couple minor reshoots. He might put in a couple scenes where characters smile, but he can't change the plot. No, yeah. Joss Whedon is supervising post-production for the most part. I mean, the movie is done. Like the actual photographing of the movie is done. I really don't think Joss Whedon. I think he had a hand in a couple of reshoots and different things, but even if he did, and even if he did, he can't change the movie. The movie is what it is. You're putting a coat of paint on it. You're not turning a Camry into a Camaro. Exactly. But back real quick to the
it would be nice to see Henry Cavill play Superman for real. I mean, it's as bad of a miscasting almost as the way they used Samuel L. Jackson in the Star Wars prequels, where it's like they cast this just incredibly charismatic, entertaining actor, and they have him play this character with no fucking personality at all. I mean, if you see
passion and no
yeah.
I mean, that was in the Plinkett reviews about part of it is the fact that they have like 30 foot of green screen and that's it. So it's like, you know, we must get this information to the council immediately, and then they just meander for a little bit and then stop because they're at the edge of the green screen.
Yeah, and I mean, if you see Henry Cavill just being himself, he's a perfectly charming guy. And he's a good-looking guy, and when he's had roles in other movies, I mean, he could be a terrific Superman if he was allowed to actually play an optimistic, hopeful character who had an ounce of hope and heroism and compassion in him, and he wasn't just directed to just basically be angry and resentful of the fact that he has to be Superman. You know, like
you know, I think we should way to salvage that. Parallel universes are always a big thing in the comic books, right?
Yeah.
Why not see if you can do a movie that has Cavill and Ralph.
Oh man.
And Welling. And
you're
Kane,
writing my.
And have like the force. You know, it's almost a fanfic idea. But I mean, get it together and have him see what other Supermen actually do and come around.
Yeah,
I bet that would be a Wright's nightmare. But you know,
the rehabilitation of Superman.
Well, he kind of needs it at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I would be happy if they just took Tyler Hoechlin, the guy who's been playing him on Supergirl, and just have him just pop in as like as like Clarence, the guardian angel in It's a Wonderful Life, and be like, "Hey, Soups, it's me. I'm you from another universe. Let's take a walk."
As opposed to Mike, the guardian angel who showed up when Kane and Hatcher were getting married.
Yeah. I'm Mike.
Oh, I remember you. Of course, that show had screwed up so badly and they did another false start in the episode. They screwed up so badly that they actually titled the episode where they got married, "Swear to God, this time we're not kidding."
Yes.
That was the actual title of the episode, and they made the rare. They didn't always do it, but they actually put the title on screen.
Yeah.
To let everyone know we are not screwing around with you, even though we're going to screw around with you again and do another fake out before we do the real one. It's finally happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lesson to be learned. It's a part of, I think, anytime you're doing like serialized storytelling where you have to build to a payoff. Mm-hmm. It applies in pro wrestling the same as it applies in like comic books and TV shows. Sometimes it's okay to build to a conclusion and then fake the audience out and make them wait a little longer. Sometimes that's actually really good because then they want to see it even more. But sometimes you just have to give them what they want.
Yeah, sometimes there eventually has to be a payoff. I mean, isn't that what largely killed the original Twin Peaks? That even for fans, nothing ever got resolved.
Well, that was a problem at first, and then what they did was they resolved it, and then it kept going after the resolution for like 15 more episodes, and that's where I get I call it well, now we're just hanging out with the characters. You know, like there's the premise of the show has been
any show that happens with pretty much any show that goes beyond season 5. You might be able to push a little further with animation, but you know, when a show gets to the 7th, 8th, 9th season, it's like, okay, now they're just. I was shocked when I saw that Bones was getting canceled because I had no idea it was still on the air. That was like,
yeah. Well, what's David Boreanaz going to do now? I hope he's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's like with Twin Peaks because I mean, and they I mean, it wasn't quite like I'm describing it. It wasn't that aimless. They did try to build like a new ongoing story, but the entire series up to that point had been about this one central mystery.
Which is always a problem. Whenever you build a show around a central mystery, you can never resolve it without ending the show as you know it.
Yeah, and then they resolve the mystery, and it's like next week on Twin Peaks. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's like, and I
season 12 now,
huh?
Isn't Supernatural into season 12? It had like a 5-season arc, and the creator left after season 5. Like, we're gonna keep going with this, and they're up to year 12. Or something. Yeah,
I mean, some shows just go on forever. I guess. I mean,
especially when you're on the the CW or the UPN or WB or whatever. When you're on one of the silly networks.
And you know who probably feels like shit? The producers of Star Trek Enterprise. because they're like, fucking Supernatural still going at 12 and we didn't even get past 4. Oh my God, our show must have been terrible.
Well, to be fair, it was for the most part.
It was. I mean, I still prefer it to Voyager, but I mean, it's not like
That's not high praise.
No, it's not exactly. It's like it's better than the worst one. It's like that Star Trek movie was better than Star Trek Nemesis. Oh, okay. Well, that's
like, yeah, Star Trek Enterprise. Yeah, we've done worse.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing you'll ever. I mean, you're not going to want to gouge out your eyes after you watch it, probably.
You saw Kate Mulgrew with UPN doing some completely bizarre promo, something about the shape of the logo for UPN or something.
Yes, I tried to find that on YouTube and I couldn't find it. I would love to, but yeah, it was one of those weird ones where because they used to do that a lot for TV shows where like it would be the actor and they were themselves, but they were also kind of their character. Like it was Kate Mulgrew.
It was like the character, but complete fourth wall breaking, like being
a exactly. It was like Kate Mulgrew in normal, like civilian clothes, like as herself, but she was talking about the show as if it was real and if she was in it, and also talking about like comparing the shape of the square in the UPN logo to a Borg cube, and it's like, God damn it, whose idea was this, and how long did it take to convince Kate Mulgrew to do this? Like, it's like, seriously, you want me to? Okay, it's not enough I have to do this awful fucking show.
I'm not doing it. You're doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. You have a contract. Shit, I'm doing it.
All right, I guess I'll do it. I mean, one of the great delights of my Star Trek fandom over the last year or so is seeing going back and watching videos of the Voyager cast like at conventions and stuff when they're on panels together, and seeing how they didn't like the show either. But like they have very fond memories of it because I think the cast bonded and they mostly got along with each other. But
largely bonded over how much they disliked the show they were in.
Yeah, well, because I mean Robert Beltran, who played Chakotay,
did he say that the day the show finally ended would be one of the happiest days of his life or something to that effect?
It is so listening to him. He's so funny because he comes across as happy. Like he comes across as very, very sort of happy-go-lucky about it. He doesn't come across as like bitter and resentful or whatever. But there was a panel I watched him on where it was one of the questions from the audience was like, what were your favorite episodes? Just some softball question from like a Comic-Con, and they got around to Robert Beltran and he said, well, I have a lot of possibilities because my favorite episodes were always the ones that were very poorly written. and everybody, and like Kate Mulgrew was sitting next to him, and Kate Mulgrew kind of like slapped him on the shoulder, like now, but everybody was laughing. And it's like, okay, so they don't, they realized that it was a pile of crap too, but
Yeah, I read that thing you pointed out to me about Ronald D. Moore. I saw some, it was a hard to read version of it that I found, but I read it, and he was very clear about the problems with the show and things that the people who are running it should have known.
Yeah, just like easy stuff. Like, don't have something important happen in an episode if it's not going to come up ever again. Yeah, my favorite line from that Ronald Moore interview was when he said they were supposedly lost in the Delta Quadrant for 70 years, but nobody on the ship ever acted like that. They all acted like they expected to be home in the next hour or so. There was no sense of loss or despair or anything.
Yeah, so Star Trek has its good shows and its bad shows. Marvel has had its good movies, and I'd say it's one really bad movie, which was The Incredible Hulk. DC, they had Marvel had one misfire. I think it's something like DC may end up having one fire.
Yeah, exactly. Man, you probably should have. Who's probably clinking champagne glasses and glad they got out when they did is Christian Bale and Christopher Nolan. They were like,
well, they were allowed to just do the movie that they wanted to do. There wasn't any nonsense about, honestly, if they had tried to start the DC cinematic universe with Christopher Nolan, I think it would be in much better shape.
Oh, I think so, because Christopher Nolan is able to make a coherent movie. I mean, he's not perfect. He has his own shortcomings as well, but I mean, he's at least able.
Everyone has their own shortcomings, Yeah.
He's at least I tell you, the thing about Christopher Nolan that makes him better than Zack Snyder to me is that he knows how to balance action and special effects with story.
Right.
He can make a
need to do that. I remember reading about different movies where they change things because of the action sequences. Like Star Trek Generations started with the Enterprise B and the whole scene and Kirk disappears. And then originally it was going to go into the base that Soren was working on, and is going to be attacked by Romulans, and the Enterprise is going to show up and fight them off. And something about like Worf dispatching a Romulan soldier still in his naval uniform survived into one of the later drafts. But at some point they changed that because they said they couldn't go from one action scene, a long action scene to open the movie, directly into another action scene.
Right.
Which is something that Zack Snyder has never learned.
No. No. What are you talking about?
When the Battle of Metropolis finally ended, I'm thinking, okay, we can finally breathe again. And there's somebody driving across the field, and the first thing that happens is an explosion where a probe smashes into the ground because Superman's destroying it because they're trying to track him with it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I actually thought in the theater, oh, Jesus Christ, give me a break.
Yeah.
This movie relent for a moment.
It's like when
directing is one of those things, like so many other things, you only really notice it when it's done wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's something you take. Editing is such a complicated thing. Sound is so much harder than picture. Trying to get sound to match up and not have like the background hiss change from one shot to another.
Yeah, yeah.
And get all the sound is incredibly difficult, and you take it for granted. But when it's wrong, wow.
Yeah,
they'll kick you out of the movie in no time.
It can kill you. I mean, if the sound is bad, it doesn't matter if your movie looks great. I mean, if the sound sounds amateurish, then your movie will play like a whole movie, even if it looks fantastic, because, even something just so small like the background noise changing pitch when they cut from shot to shot, you notice that and you're like, oh God,
yeah,
this is fake. This is all fake.
Yeah. Suspension of disbelief only goes so far.
Yeah. Well, what do you say we wrap this up, partner?
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Since Pierre couldn't make it again.
Well, yeah.
I'm sorry. It's an excused absence, I guess. If he's.
Yeah, we'll give him this one.
He's being held by people that Liam Neeson would have tried to kill in a Taken movie, I guess.
Yeah, Taken is another one of those things. It's a concept where you can only go so far with it. Taken 3, it's like, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah.
It's like 24. It's in 24 where Jack Bauer's daughter got kidnapped like 4 times in the first season and then twice in the second. It's like, okay, enough.
Like if you can't think of anything else to do with this character, just send her home. Yeah. Taken was great. I could have just watched it 2 more times instead of watching Taken 2 and Taken 3 because the first one is fine. Yeah. All right.
All right, and we'll pencil this in for another month from now.
Yeah, and we'll see about. I guess I'll find out. What country Pierre is being held, and maybe we can call. Make contact with their embassy or something. If they like the country he's in has an embassy.
All right. Well, something to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, good luck, Pierre.
So, have we solved the gun violence problem? Did we offer any insights?
Probably not.
No.
We didn't solve it. The Australians solved it.
Touché.
we just haven't done anything about it.
Touché is the term for sword fighting, which nobody accidentally, no 4-year-old has ever accidentally killed a sibling with a sword. Yeah,
that's something to think about. Sometimes it is okay to copy off of someone else's paper. And I think
when lines are on the line, yeah, go for it.
If it's between copying off of the guy's test next to you, the really smart guy who's going to get a good grade, and having thousands of people get killed, just copy off the guy's test. Somebody he has a funny accent maybe, but some people think it's nice. I think he has a nice accent.
Yeah. One thing about Star Trek is not everybody has a phaser.
Yeah, exactly. They keep the phasers locked up.
Yeah. And sometimes the captain isn't white. What? Yeah.
And he even talks about racism, and then people get pissed off at that for some reason.
Yeah.
Why'd you go to talk about racism? Okay. Anyway, that's it.
we got to get out of here, or else we're going to go on about this forever, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh shit, they're starting in on Star Trek again. This is going to take forever.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next month.